If you decide to do an event, then what we need from you is, firstly, a clear explanation of that event. Secondly, we need a clear sense that that event is interpreted in different ways and what those different interpretations are. And thirdly, we need to know what the relevance of that event is to today. Now, what you'll notice there is that I've broken the project down into 3 quite specific sections, aims, requirements. You've got about 1,500 words. A really good way of making quite a bit of progress quickly is to divide your 1,500 words roughly by those 3 categories I have just given you. So it's quite a good idea to package and structure a project on an economic event by those 3 categories, even to the point where you divide up the word count and you say, right, I'm going to do 400, 500 words on explaining this event, what happened. Secondly, I'm going to spend 500 words on introducing 2, 3 clearly different interpretations and perspectives on that event. Thirdly, I'm going to explain in 400 or 500 words 2 or 3 or whatever lessons for the modern day from that event, or relevance of that event to the modern day. That's actually a really good start. Just doing it that way will tick lots of boxes. If you decide to do it a different way to that, you have to remember that you are missing lots of boxes unless you do something extra. So I would focus on those 3 things. And I would say that's the essence of doing things systematically. Systematically. In an organised, joined up, strategic, coherent way. So, if you're going to do each of those 3 things, how do you go about getting the information? If you're doing an economic event that is not in the last 4 or 5 years, that's a few years old, the way to get good information about the event is to read a couple of specialised monographs, books, on that topic, on that event. There'll be books on that event if it's a big event that happened a few years ago or more. There'll be books. In other words, I would avoid over-reliance on using the internet and internet-based Google searches for sources on these events. It's not impossible that that type of source might be useful, but it's almost guaranteed that reading a few substantive academic monographs, texts, books is going to be spot on with the information and the perspectives on that event. So, if you were asking me for advice, I would say, please focus and use academic sources to get the information about the event and the interpretations of that event. I would also say the university over time is going to expect you and want you to start using academic journal articles, academic journals, which are accessible by searching through a variety of academic databases in the library database system. One of these is called JSTOR, there's another called EBSCO, there's various of them. And these are actually the ultimately best place to find really specific stuff which is of high academic quality on the subjects that you're studying. So I would just say I really encourage you to use the academic journals that exist and to search them for articles on the event that you have decided to study. So far I've mentioned books and journal articles, and I just want to put my focus there so that you really understand that I'm fully aware there's an internet out there and that it's got some useful stuff on it, but you would not go there first for the best sources on this stuff. You just wouldn't. If you do go there first, there's a really good chance you will find duff stuff. Stuff that doesn't go deep enough or far enough. Stuff that doesn't give you different perspectives. So, my big pitch here is that an economic event, unless it's very, very recent, is going to have very good material written on it in an academic context, monographs and journal articles. Secondly, in the same field, if you're doing a more recent event, there's still a good chance that those academic areas I've mentioned will have some material. So, there's a lot of stuff published already in an academic context on the Euro crisis, the Greek crisis, the current financial crisis. There is already quite a lot of good literature that's been published. But sometimes, yes, for very recent things, you're going to need a slightly different kind of source. And that source would be highly respectable, good quality journalistic sources. I would go with sources called The New Internationalist and The Economist. And I'd always make sure I used them both. The reason I always use them both is that they will give you different perspectives, opposing perspectives, on almost every issue. The Economist is associated loosely with what I would term a liberal stroke neoliberal and Western and quite conservative approach to economic issues. The New Internationalist gives you an alternative view which tends to be politically from a more radical, leftist, internationalist and kind of developing world approach. And so what you will find on almost all of the topics you could do, certainly in any economic event, those two sources are great because they will analyse and present that event in opposite ways, and that will give you the different interpretations of an event that we are looking for. So good to use those two sources. Economic events also, I just want to re-emphasize this again. I know that you can find stuff on the internet, and I know that some of it can be good. But what I want to see in your bibliographies is that you've kind of ignored that option largely, and that you've focused on academic sources about the events. I want to see different academic viewpoints and perspectives on that event. And the best place to get that is not the guy who got to the top of the Google search term. Yeah? If you pay 300 quid, you can make sure that your site comes out first. It's no guarantee of quality. It's quite often a guarantee of political extremism and partisanship. So quite a lot of that stuff is to be ignored.